Good afternoon and welcome to Learning Tree International's webinar entitled Office 365, Key Tools for Personal Productivity and Collaboration. Today's webinar is presented over voice over IP, so your mics are muted. Please feel free to provide any comments or questions in the chat pod, and we will address your questions at the end of the webinar. We'd also like to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand in a couple of weeks' time or potentially earlier. I'd like to present our presenter today, Martin Baker. He is actually presenting from the UK where it is 5 p.m. his time. Martin has been a long-time author and instructor for Learning Tree. He is the director of Waterfall Consulting, which is a Microsoft partner. He has been a SharePoint user since it was a free add-on for Front Page, and he's been an Office 365 user since it was called BPOS. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Martin.
Well, thank you very much, Jackie, and thank you all, wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you are listening in on to this webinar that's been presented today. And the challenge that we've set ourselves is to cover Office 365 in 45 minutes. Seemed like a good idea at the time. So obviously we won't be able to do a deep dive into any of the particular tools, but I would really like to impart some useful practical tips, perhaps possibilities of things that you could do once you get back and start working again with Office 365, so that you can get the most out of your implementation of Office 365, whatever or however it is that you want to benefit from it. So I think what you get out of it will to some extent depend on your experience level. So maybe we could just use the chat pod right away and you could give me a little idea whether you're an end user or whether you're an admin, or what is it that you normally do with Office 365 and how long you've been working with Office 365. So if you'd like to just quickly jot that in the chat pod, user, a couple of years or 6 months, or maybe it is you're not even using it yet and you want to just have a little look around. So if you could do that for me, that would be very useful. And I'll just look to the side here. That's me looking at the comments on the chat. Okay, good. Right. Okay, already see there's quite a range of experience there, which is good. A couple of admin type people, and I'm sure you weren't expecting us to cover administration in this webinar today, but this webinar is all about productivity, personal productivity, so we're not really delving into the admin side of things. We're looking at how to use it really and get the best out of the tools. Good. Okay, so we got some real new ones there. Paul, excellent. About a month, some 6 months, some 2 or 3 years. Brilliant. Okay, that's great. Good to know. Good to know. So as we look at the objectives here, we're going to have a look at some of the key tools inside Office 365 and see how you can benefit personally and also collaboration-wise as well, how you can work in your organization. So two kind of aspects to it. Most people are using Outlook all day long, so even if you've been using it for years, I'm just going to try and show you 1 or 2 little things that might just smooth out your day just a little bit, the odd wrinkle here and there, maybe get off to a better start. OneDrive for personal files. That's been around for a little while now, and so hopefully you're getting some good use out of that. And then expanding out with SharePoint. Notice we've got David there saying just moving to SharePoint Online, so I presume you've been using SharePoint on-premise for a while, and that is another one of the things that's happening now. People have been using these tools perhaps on-premise, now they're using them online, so that makes a bit of a difference. So we're going to have a quick look at the classic SharePoint versus modern experience. Microsoft love these expressions, don't they? So we'll have a look at what that means. Taking it to the web, taking it mobile, I think that's really important today. How can we utilize these tools without being a programmer, without having to be a developer, having some programming language, and that's where PowerApps and Flow comes into play. And then finally, Teams, the new kid on the block, one of the newest tools that's in there, but really kicking up a storm at the moment. And let's see how that works. What does it replace? What does it not replace? How does it fit into workflow? And then finally, keeping up with the pace of change, and that is understanding Microsoft's roadmap. So they do let us know what's going on, to some extent at least. So initially, to understand get the best idea about what kind of tools are in the toolkit, is to look at Office 365 and go to your Office 365 home page, which is quite easy to do. You can go to office.com, you just have to click the sign in button. If you go to portal.office.com, it takes you straight to the sign in. And once you sign in, you get a jaunty little welcome message, depending on the time of day. And the apps, the kind of commonly used apps here, you can install the desktop apps from here as well, Office. Up to the top left, we have the affectionately known the waffle. So we can click on that, and again pops out a little menu, and we can go even further, go to all apps, and see the whole range of tools. And of course, the tools that are available to you will depend on the package that your organization has signed up for. So you may see them slightly different to this. If I scroll down the Office 365 homepage, some recommended documents, recently used documents, etc. And then down at the bottom here, in the Places area, you can see we've got OneDrive and SharePoint. So even from the home page, your personal Office 365 homepage, you can tell that OneDrive and SharePoint are really important pieces in the puzzle, aren't they? So we'll come to those in a moment of time and see how we can benefit out of those. Just going back again then, and to mention that another part of getting the best out of Office 365 is the mobile aspect of it. Mobile has become the thing, hasn't it? And so I think Microsoft long ago gave up on hoping that people were going to buy Windows phones. I don't want to upset anybody here. Anybody got a Windows phone? Anyway, so they've really thrown everything at building really nice apps for the Android and iOS. So the difference there is perhaps you have to download the individual apps that you want. So you can go to your app store. If you want Word, you download the Word app, Excel, download the Excel app, etc. And so individually, you just download the ones that you want. And again, just log in with your email address and password. And bingo, you've got it on your mobile phone. Whether you enjoy the experience of editing a Word document on the mobile phone may depend on the size of your fingers and the size of your phone. But nevertheless, technically, it's possible. A bit of pinching and zooming. But with OneDrive, as we'll see in a moment, you can view about 200 different file types anyway, so that's quite handy. So let's take a look at Outlook. So when you come into work in the morning, first thing that you do, fire up the computer, open up Outlook. So drop us in the chat pod. What's the first thing that you do? Open up Outlook, then what happens? What is it that you do first? So there's a few possibilities. Okay, good. Excellent. There we go. Straight to the inbox. David says calendar and then messages. Check email. And a few more. Yeah, inbox. Yeah, and that's not surprising really, is it? Because the default setting on Outlook is when you open it up, it does default. Okay, wait for it. Get a coffee. Yeah, excellent. It does open up to the inbox. So it does kind of encourage you to do that. And I can understand why Microsoft do that, because lots of small businesses, people, individuals, they just use Outlook for email. Perhaps they use the calendar. They almost never use tasks. But if you're in an enterprise environment, you're a busy person, you've got to use all three if you want to keep control of your time, your tasks, and your email. And again, the great thing about Office Aha. Well, so we're jumping right to the end there then, Kayum. Will Teams cut down Outlook usage? Okay, let's give you a quick answer, and that is yes. And we'll see that. I've got that as the last slot on the presentation here today. So Outlook, WMD, weapons of mass distraction. Yes. So you can get to Outlook on the web. You can go straight to it. You don't have to go to the homepage. So outlook.office.com, straight to Outlook. It's available on the mobile. The desktop version, of course, is the fully featured ultimate personal information tool. It's been around for years and years, so it's exceptional in its capabilities. So let's have a look at that. Let's fire up Outlook. And notice, as with all the Office apps these days, it's Office 365. It's not Office 2016. It's not going to go out of date. It's going to keep moving and grooving. So one or two things we've said. How many times have you found when you've opened up Outlook and you start answering emails, the next thing you know, it's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, it's lunchtime, and you think, I haven't done any work yet. What's happened to the morning? The whole morning's just disappeared. What happened? And frequently it's because we just got sucked into the inbox, and it's just some kind of vortex. We lose all track of time. We miss meetings, maybe appointments or whatever, because the email just seems to have that effect on us. So one or two little things about Outlook that can perhaps help. And one is the fact that you can actually control the interface here, so you can build your own tabs if you wish. But one thing I would like to actually, we can just tweak a few things here. One thing I don't personally like is this focused inbox. I don't know if you like it, but they're trying to be helpful and tell you what's most important and what isn't, but I'd like to make that decision myself, so I just take that off and see all of them. And then one or two other things that would be kind of handy. I'm not keen on seeing the reading pane. I like to see as many of these things as possible. And let's turn the one line off. Like so. Right, now I can see loads of emails. I can quickly process these down, and I'm not going to get sucked into answering the odd one until I'm ready to answer the emails. But the key tip, and I've had people say this has made the biggest difference to their whole day, is just going in here to the options, go into the advanced section here, and Outlook start and exit. Microsoft default back to your inbox. And I would suggest, and I think, who was it who said, David said, he checks his calendar first. Okay, so if you set that to calendar, and while we're at it, we know we're getting loads of emails. Do we need little messages telling us we're getting emails all the time, little sounds and envelopes appearing? I don't think so. So let's just get rid of those little distractions. And now, if I just close down Outlook and fire it up, straight to the calendar. So I have a quick look. We've used some colors to color code the things, so within 1 second I can tell what's going on. I'm looking at my particular day, like so. Now I can go to the email. But if I've got a meeting now, I can dash straight off to it and come back to the email. So the handy little tip, just nipping into there and going straight into the calendar. But we do have to handle the email, don't we? So if we get across to the email, now one of the problems is that who leaves, time for honesty again here, who leaves emails in their inbox to remind them to do something later on? Who does that? Let's have some honesty. We can have a confession time here as well. How many emails are in your inbox at the moment? Yeah, David, yeah, yes. And I'm sure, yeah, okay, right. There's a problem with that, isn't there? If you leave the emails in your inbox and they're there, every time you look at the inbox, you've got to look up and down, try and see which is important. There's no real effective way of showing what's important and what isn't and prioritizing things. They just kind of line up by date, unless you've organized them in other ways, but typically we have them by date. So what is a really helpful tip here is if you've got an email that you can reply straight back to, obviously you can just reply straight back to it. Do you want chocolate biscuits with your coffee? Yes, job done. But if it's going to take half an hour, a couple of hours to answer the email, then what you can do, so let's take this one here, just click and drag it on top of the task icon, and it turns the email into a task. So now we can say, when are we interested in doing this? So let's say today, And also I can change the priority. So if it's really important, let me say it's high priority, save and close. So now that's going to pop up on my task list. I'm not worried about missing it. Maybe I've got another one down here and I need to reply to this one sometime later on. Right click, let go over the tasks, pops up with a little menu, and if you pick copy here as task with attachment, actually gives you a little link back to that email. Again, you can set the date, today, and we'll leave that as normal. That seems to be reasonable, doesn't it? So now we can have a look at tasks and we'll see various tasks are appearing there for us. So the final little touch to this is if you go to view and come across to to-do bar, you can put tasks here. And your tasks, with a little bit of tweaking of the view here, your tasks for the day are there and the time that you've got is here. What a great way to manage what's going on. You can come back to this view at any moment in time and you've got down on here all the things that you should be doing. So this was the one, say, okay, normal, I've got a bit of time, I've got to reply to it. No hunting around for the email. Just double click on the little shortcut. There's the email. I can hit reply. Off I go. Do the reply, etc. Job done. And then I can tick the box. Say, yep, that one's done. Task out of the way. So then it comes to filing these emails. Now, a lot of people are very attached to their folder system that they've got, that they've developed over the years by category, business, whatever. Just got to ask yourself, is the time worth it? I mean, we invented these systems hundreds of years ago, and we're still doing it with folders. This is how long it takes to file emails. They just put that. For some time now, and Google does this, Apple does this, and Microsoft as well. They give you an archive button, an archive folder, and that's how long it should take to file emails. All this sticking them in folders. Well, if you like them and you can empty your inbox every day, then carry on. But if you can't, just chuck them in the archive. The interface is built for it, and then there's an absolutely amazing search system which appears the moment that you click in the search bar here. You get this special toolbar. So I encourage you to have investigating that. You can do categories, all sorts of stuff. Very, very powerful. So that can just perhaps change your approach to the day. Make sure that it starts up in the calendar. Have the to-do bar. Just a right click here, you can change the view settings to get it to just separate by priority. And you know what to do. Get on and do it. So that's the first little bit of personal productivity. OneDrive then, that's our next tool. So why use OneDrive? Well, if you keep the documents on your C drive on your laptop, you lose it or it crashes, then the documents are gone. So the documents in OneDrive are stored in Microsoft's data centers. If you have a minute or some time, you can go online and look at some articles about the incredible data centers that they've got set up there, keeping these documents available for you all of the time. One of the nice things about using OneDrive as well is, again, there's a mobile app for it, so you can access from your phone your documents at any time without worrying about VPNing back into the network. And because the documents are online, you can also take them offline in case you don't have a signal on your phone. Tap a little button, the document comes onto your phone, and then you can make sure you've got a particular document that's necessary, and then you can just free up the space afterwards to get the space back. So let's have a little look at that. Now we've got a OneDrive icon here, and the browser version of OneDrive is very handy to get a good idea of what's going on with your documents as well, because it has this sharing column down here, so you can quickly see which files are actually shared. If you're in that particular folder, you can see right next to it. But by default, any documents that you put in your OneDrive They're yours, so they're not shared with anybody else. So that's the whole purpose of storing these documents in your OneDrive. You've got a terabyte of space, so there's tons of space there to put all the things that you might particularly need. You can just you can click on upload to put other documents. Drag and drop works fine, and you can create new documents and folders in there directly from the browser interface and use the browser-based kind of cut-down versions, the online versions of the Office products, which again can be quite handy depending on where you are. You can get access to what you need to do. The mobile version as well of OneDrive has a file viewer. I think there's up to about 200 file formats now, and with things like PDF you can actually annotate them as well with a pencil or with your finger or highlight stuff. So that's pretty functional. However, if you want to edit the document, you just tap the button for the application if it's a Word document, and providing you've got the Word app on your phone as well, then it will open up in the actual file handler such as Word or Excel, and you can edit the document there. So it can go straight from OneDrive to that particular app just in a couple of clicks. If you've got OneDrive actually on your machine, so let's just bring this up. It should look something like this with OneDrive and then your company name next to it. So that'll be the OneDrive that you should be using for your business stuff. It is possible to have a OneDrive for personal use as well. And Microsoft will give you a little free amount of space there, but nowhere near a terabyte, obviously. So this is pretty handy as well. We've got some little icons here. The little blue cloud, the little blue outlined white fluffy cloud indicates that that file is stored online. So provided I'm connected to the internet, I've got an internet access, I can double click on that and it's just going to download that document for me and bring it up into Word as it was. There we go, like so. So, and now we've got a little tick, so I've got a local copy of that to work on. If I want to ensure that I've got a local copy, I can right click and select the always keep on this device. I can share documents from here with other people. That's okay for ad hoc, the odd sharing situation. It's not generally designed for teams to collaborate around sharing, but rather than emailing a document to somebody else, it's much better to do the sharing thing and share a link with somebody. That gives you a good bit of control, and you'll notice in the browser interface here that we've got the little share button there. You'll see the share pops up all over the place. When you select it, it's up here. They all take you to exactly the same thing. And you just need to check out what it says at the top here, because you can send a link which somebody can forward on to other people and it'll work for them. Or you can limit it to your organization, or you can limit it to specific people. You can set an expiry date so the link will only work for so long. And a very new thing, something that's just come along recently, is this block download. So people can only view it in the browser. They can't even download a copy of the document. So that's just appeared fairly recently. Good. Okay. So that's OneDrive. And frequently people ask, well, should I use SharePoint? Should I use OneDrive? And the clue is kind of in the name. So SharePoint, it's got the tools there that are designed to help you to work with a group of other people. So the tools are there to share things like checkout, check-in, other things. Whereas OneDrive is for you, for your personal documents. There's a little bit of an overlap in there, but really, if you want to share a personal document, if you find that you're collaborating over things, you probably should be thinking about doing something with SharePoint. Speaking of which, that's where we are now. So let's just go back to the chat here. How many people have been working with SharePoint, classic SharePoint, on-premise perhaps? Have got any classic SharePoint people? Right, okay, since 2003, brilliant. Yeah, it's a long time. Okay, 2012, fantastic, okay. So we've got a variety of options going on there. So naturally here, we've got a big change going on, haven't we? A classic SharePoint, so those of you who've been around for a while, I'm sure you will appreciate the expression site collections. So site collections, and then within what is site collections? It's a collection of sites. So they all start with a root site and then subsites and subsites and subsites below that. The trouble with that is it's a little bit rigid. So it's not so easy if your organization has a reorg and they say, we'd like to take this site from here and put it in this other site collection over there. Not so easy. So Microsoft have done a complete change around here. And with modern SharePoint, it's a flat sort of design, really. And so all the sites are connected together through a hub site. Hub sites can only be created by an admin. And so whenever a user goes to their SharePoint homepage, they can create a new site. It just floats around on its own now. And they can be glued together later on, which makes it easier to move things around. So let's nip back here and see that we've got SharePoint here on our Office homepage. And so now we come to our own personal SharePoint homepage. A bit like a portal site here, so there's bits of news, frequently visited sites, etc., recent sites over here, ones that we're following, etc. And of course the option here to create a site. So Microsoft have simplified this dramatically from the old days with classic SharePoint. What they're trying to do is they're trying to make it easier for end users, non-technical people, to actually put some information together in a useful way. So they've simplified these settings, and basically there's two choices. So typically somebody wants to create a site is because they want to collaborate with a group of other people. So that would be a team site. Alternatively, we've got the communication site where you want to put some information up, but typically open it out to a lot of people to be able to see this information, a bit like intranet situation. So you have this choice, one site or the other. The team site creates a group, you can put people in it. The communication site doesn't require a group initially, you just have to allow access to the people in your organization that you want to have access in there. So I just pick the team site here, give it a name, let's call it webinar demo for no particular reason. You notice it's putting together a bit of an email address. I could give it a description. There is a privacy setting here. Typically that would be private. We can change the privacy later on if you're comfortable with security from the past. It works the same. Add additional owners. Usually a good idea to have at least a couple of owners. Add members. We can add members, etc. That we know. Let's just put somebody in there to make it slightly interesting. So let's go. We can add more now, or we can add them later on. That's not crucial. So then we've got our new team site. And so lots of things about this have changed now, simplified. For instance, the editing. Simple button up here. And you can see the layout of the page on here, 4 quarters in that one. So we've got little sections to the side. We can go and say, okay, how do we want this to be laid out? We can change the way it's laid out across that level there. And one of the biggest changes is the simplification of the web parts. And to be fair, the old classic web parts, you had to be a bit of a techie, that horrible grey box that appeared on the right hand side. So these are a lot simpler. Let's get down here now. Let's just add new web part. Let's say we want the type, so we just add a text web part, and voila, we can start typing. We've got a mini word processor there. We can format it. So all the kind of standard things that you'd need or would want to do in a little bit of text. But there's whole bunches of things that you might want to add. Let's look here, images, file viewer, scroll down, gets even more interesting. Kindle content, etc. So some nice web parts that can be easily edited, not really complicated. Not really complicated things to edit now. So it's been simplified to the point where people can effectively, with some training still, but with minimal training, they can get up and running with what they need to do. So, SharePoint, okay, I mean, we could talk all week about SharePoint. It's a huge topic, isn't it? A huge topic, but just a little insight into modern SharePoint and how you can get up and running with that. PowerApps. So, anybody using InfoPath? Looking down for the chat pod here, and any InfoPath users, anybody been using that for forms? Typically used for customizing SharePoint forms, although it's not limited to that. Yeah, a few people doing that. And of course, there's been a bit of uncertainty, especially a few years ago. 2010 came out, it was like InfoPath everything. 2013 came out, nobody said anything about InfoPath, and then Microsoft said they weren't going to create a follow-up product, and they'd honour it for 10 years. Came to 2016, still weren't clear what was happening, so they changed it to 10 years from 2016. But now PowerApps is the replacement for the InfoPath forms. Not a direct replacement, not feature for feature, but it does the job for customizing the SharePoint forms. Also allows you to build mobile apps as well. And the key thing here, of course, it's no code. It does, I mean, I'll show you in a second, but it does benefit from some understanding of the development process, but you can get up and started pretty quickly. So that's a nice thing. Oops, let's just go into here. So we are in a website here, aren't we? Let's just go to documents here. In fact, if I just go back to my SharePoint for a second, and go to this. That's good. Go to this one here. Here's one I prepared earlier. So we've got some lists and libraries going on here. So I've got an issues list. By the way, you can still get to classic templates for SharePoint if you go to the site contents and then go to new site from there. It gives you all the old templates that are still available. So if we're looking at PowerApps here, we can go to create an app. Give it a name down here. So in fact, I've got one already created. So let's just go to that. So we're looking at an app here. And if I go to edit in PowerApps, what we've got is a SharePoint list. I can go back to that now and let's go to the list. And if I click on new, here I can add new items to the list. I mean, that's always struck me as pretty good. If you've ever done any hard hand coding in the past and you've had a database and you've had to build a form, then you've got to bind all the fields in the form to the database. It's such a lot of work and you always end up chasing bugs. Whereas once you create a list here, which you've basically created the database table, SharePoint creates a form for you automatically. And I think most of the time that form works well. However, what if you want to do something with that form? Well, this form is the form that was created just directly from that list. I just clicked it, save you watching it whirring, and it builds the screens that you need, the browse screen, the detail screen, and the edit screen. And basically we've got a functioning app at that point. We can test it out, like so. And so this is how it would look at a mobile phone. So we've got our little issues here that we're looking at. So let's just let's close that. That was a preview. So let's just go back to the browse screen. That would be more interesting to do a preview of. So now we've got a couple of issues on there. So we've got this damaged box issue that's been added. And so we say our Alan de Jong, he's been assigned this. He's out now checking up on it. He's on his mobile phone. He can go in there. He can just tap on edit and he can say, okay, it's an active issue, I've fixed it now, it's resolved. And you can pop down here some comments as well, blah, 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 blah. Tick that, say okay, job done. So he's been there, he's done that. Maybe he's picked up another issue. He can click plus here on his phone, he can add those extra issues in there. And of course, when we come back here, just give that a refresh. So there's the issue, and there it is. It says resolved next to it. So simply from that little form, he's able to easily input into that information straight from his phone. So that's probably the easiest way to get some good value out of using PowerApps, is just to build little apps that connect straight to a SharePoint list. But there's more. There's absolutely more. Let's just go back here. And if we go to our waffle, and we don't see it there, so we click on that and scroll down to PowerApps, like so, we can go directly to the PowerApps Studio. Now, if you've had it a little while, you might have downloaded a desktop version of the PowerApps Studio. A little button up here that offers you the ability, or it used to offer you the ability to do that, but that's not recommended now. All you can do is play things in there. You can't build apps. The building apps now is all done in the PowerApps Studio. So for instance, if we go down here and go to create and then click on all, again, another way that you can get started quickly is by using one of these templates in here. So it's a great way of having a look at how they work. And so maybe we could say, pick this one here. So notice what happens first of all is, before you make this app, you have to decide, are you focusing on a phone or a tablet? So you can choose, and it's going to create the appropriate layout for that particular app. So let's say make this app. And within the nearest hint of time, getting things ready, loading, is putting all the bits and bobs together. So again, we're working from a template, and clearly there were some blank templates at the top there that you probably saw. So you can start completely blank and make the connections to whatever you want to do. But that template has now been brought in. So you can see a whole bunch of different screens were required for this particular template to work. And it is a template, so that's great. You can play around with it. But if you actually like it, if it would prove to be useful, make my own app. So it'll make your own version, and then it just requires a data store, which would put it in OneDrive or SharePoint or wherever you need to store the data. But it just requires your data store for that to be your own app, and you can tweak it, customize it. You can obviously change the name from Contoso to whatever you require, and tweak some things about the app and make it useful. So whether you come at it from SharePoint and then just fire up PowerApps so that it edits and creates you a nice little mobile app for it, or whether you go directly into the PowerApps Studio, either way, there's huge potential, especially for allowing people in your organization to access your SharePoint data via a mobile app. That's fantastic, a great possibility. So one thing that joins really closely, is usually mentioned in the same breath as PowerApps, is Flow. So back to the chat. Any SharePoint workflow people out there? Anybody use SharePoint workflow in the past? SharePoint Designer, one of the great things in SharePoint Designer was the ability to create workflows. People loved it. Went through a few changes of recent versions. So victim of its own success, so they sprung it out into a workflow server. But going forward, again, it was, what was Microsoft going to quite do about this? I wondered if they were going to buy Nintex, because they got forms and they got workflow at Nintex and all based in the browser. It makes complete sense, though, to have these browser-based tools. So you just rock up with a browser, a modern browser, and you can use the application. You don't need to download any software onto your computer. So that's the great thing. So Flow allows us to build business logic. So that's the idea. Really, I suppose the the phrase that plays here is automation, isn't it? So if you've got boring stuff that happens, see if you can automate it. If it happens frequently, see if you can automate it. But the big change here is it's not just Microsoft services. So you can glue together all sorts of services. And so the idea again is that people right up there with the information, the business users, can put these things together. And so the IT guys, the developers, they can get on with other fancy stuff, and they can leave us in peace to do what we need to do right here. And so we can do things like in SharePoint, we can work with data, work with files, move files around, set up approval, workflows, all sorts of things like that. But it goes further than that, because we can connect to and integrate all sorts of data, not just at Microsoft. And so it goes hand in hand with PowerApps and its abilities as well. You often hear the two of them mentioned right together. So let's see what that means for us. So let's get back to our little Office home page here. And we've got flows popped up on here now. See, PowerApps is here as well, which is great. I don't have to go to the waffle. And so if we go to templates here, you will see a bazillion templates that Microsoft have already created to get you up and running, automating things. And you'll notice lots of them are not Microsoft. I'll just give you a quick look here. Start approval when a new item is added. If I just click on that. So it needs to check your permissions. Yeah, we're good to go on all of those things. Click continue. And so what you see here are the key parts of a workflow. First of all, you need a trigger. What's going to cause this workflow to kick off? Well, in this case, it's when a new item is created, and we have to tell it in which site, in which list. And then there's this approval workflow, which is fine. We've got to assign it to somebody. And then the condition comes in. So you've got a condition here, and if it's yes, if it's approved, this happens. If it's no, that happens. So you've got a trigger, you've got an action, and you've got a condition. Those are the three things. Obviously, there's lots of actions that you can have, but one of the handy ones is here, where you can actually put together an email, customized email. So you can type in here additional text, blah, blah. But you can also add dynamic content. That's what these little markers are here, and that can pull information out of the system, or maybe if you wanted time, so you could pick a particular current time. Let's scroll down a second. We've got all sorts of functions in here. Mail and date and time. Okay, we can add that in there and pop that in, and so that would then be part of the email. So you get that customized content in the email. So all sorts of possibilities to automate things. Let's just go back to the templates again. Yeah, we'll leave that. And so let's just go for social media. And so you can see we've got Twitter on here, we've got all sorts of Instagram up there, etc. One of the interesting ones is that you've got an approval process with a SharePoint list and Twitter, so that you know, if you have an Elon Musk sort of moment where he's posting things out that haven't been approved, well, you can put things into a SharePoint list. They have to be approved before they get tweeted automatically out into Twitter. And a lot of these connectors are the same for PowerApps as well as for Flow. So the ability to connect to all these different services. You'll notice that some of them are premium, some of them are standard. So you can guess what happens to your wallet when you pick a premium one, can't you? Great. We're doing okay. We just have one last thing to look at. And we're almost out of time here before the Q&A, but let me squeeze something here about Teams. The problem, and that was brought up right at the start, the problem with the inbox, emails, information, all disappearing right, left and centre. If somebody moves from the organisation or department, it becomes very difficult to keep track of what's going on. So what does Teams replace? Does it replace Skype for Business? Yes, it does. It's been developed by the same business unit as Skype that does Skype for Business. So currently you can run both of them, but currently now Teams is ready to start taking over if the functionality is there that you require. Most of the functionality of Skype for Business is now in Teams. It's chat-based, Teams, so does it take over from Yammer? Well, yes and no. No, in that Yammer is still the best for enterprise communication. Yes, in the fact that where you used to perhaps make Yammer groups, you'll probably use Teams going forward. Does it replace SharePoint? Absolutely not. When you upload files into Teams, they're actually stored behind the scenes inside SharePoint. When you create a team, then a SharePoint site is created for you. Does it replace Exchange? No, it doesn't. The chats are stored in Exchange, so that way you can search and find them later on. So the Teams is an interface that brings everything together, rather than you're having to jump out to Outlook for these emails, go to SharePoint for this, go here, there, and everywhere for whatever you need. If you've started using Teams, you know there's a web interface, but there's also a desktop version which you download from the web version. So you just go to the web one, click download the app, and bingo, you're in here. And the whole thing is focused around creating, surprisingly enough, teams. So that's all about who's in the team. So let's just go here and say manage team. So you can manage the members of the team. Once you've got a team, you create channels. And so the channels really guide the conversation. So the perceived wisdom here is not to have too many channels, but you could have up to 200, but typically just guide them around function or an event or something specific. So you might have a few. And then the beauty of it is the chat that is there is persistent. So if you're arranging an event, an annual event, and you come around to arrange it this year, you can look back in that channel for the event last year and you can see, what was it we decided to do? Oh yeah, there it is. And if you upload a document, the document's there in the channel. And you can add additional tabs to customize that channel. And look at all the possibilities here. All these third-party things that you can add as a tab. So, for instance, I just added a PDF tab here, changed the name to business card. So if we're discussing this, there we are. There's a little, what do you think to the, what do you think? Well, we can have a chat about this document right next to it, like so. We can also, let's go here, have a little bit of humor as well if we want. There's all sorts of memes and graphics that you can add in there. That can be switched off if your organization is a little more dour, but we can also have a little bit of fun if we wish to do that. So definitely the way forward. Still a lot of questions about can you do this, can you do that, but it's inexorable, it will happen. So I suggest you start getting used to it now, even if it's a little rough around the edges, because you're going to be using it in the near future, for sure. How to keep up to speed? Well, just keep tabs on the roadmap. Sign up for emails. They'll give you a weekly update, tell you what's going on, what's happening now, and especially in your own tenant, when things are going to change. They won't tell you the minute that it's going to change, but they will give you a good idea about when. You can sign some people up for early adopters so that you can test things out before it hits the whole of your organization as well. So that's definitely well worth doing. And just to say that if you're watching this webinar on YouTube at some time in the future, it was recorded on December the 4th, 2018. Therefore, with the constantly changing Office 365, if you see some things on your tenant that don't look like this webinar, well, that's the whole point. So you're fun to try and figure that one. So hopefully you found some useful bits in there. Jackie mentioned the webinar will appear shortly on YouTube, so if you wanted to replay some of those, slower speed so you can check some of the settings, feel free to do that. But I hope you found some practical topical points in there. We are directing people towards some of Learning Tree's courses if you want to take this on further. The Office 365 Maximizing Productivity Potential is course 978, where we actually spend 3 days doing what we've done in 45 minutes and a bit more as well. So if you really want to get stuck in with some of this, then a great hands-on course. There's also a Microsoft course, Enabling and Managing Office 365. That's an MOC course. That's a 5-day course. That is for admins, not for users. So the 978 is for users, and the 8437 for admins. Of course, there are lots of other topics that Learning Tree covers, a whole host of different courses on SharePoint. You can see there's a lot of potential there. So there's a link on the screen to the 978. Also, that link on the screen to webinars, because there are a number of webinars that are around you can register for on the upcoming weeks. And also there are quite a few recorded ones that are linked to there now. So thank you very much for participating. Thanks very much for participating in the chat as well. I'd like to hand back over to Jackie, and I believe we might have a minute or two for a question, if there are any.
Yes, thank you, Martin. Please, if you have any questions, enter them in the chat pod. We do have a few questions here already. So Martin, is there an easy way to see which files I am sharing in OneDrive?
In OneDrive, yes, okay. It's very easy to start sharing things, and then after a while you've shared loads and loads of files and not quite sure what's going on. Let's just go back to the demo here then. This is where the browser interface is a lot easier than using the file manager interface here, because you've got, if I go to OneDrive, and on the left hand side here you see one of the options is shared. So if we click on that, and then up here you've got two options, shared with me, so I can see all the files other people have shared with me, and here's the one, shared by me. So now I can see particular files that I've shared, and I can select that. And this little button over here is real handy, the info details panel, because actually I can see what's going on now with that file. And if I click manage access, I can just hit stop sharing, and it stops everybody sharing. Or I can come down here and say, well, Deborah, I don't want her to see it anymore. And by the way, I've had a phone call from Patty. She's the president, and she says, what are you doing giving me just read-only access? I need to edit this. So I just click that and I go, edit, bingo, Patty's happy, and I've still got a job. So yeah, the browser interface gives you a real good idea about what's going on once you've started sharing things.
And we do have some questions in the chat pod, Martin. Third-party apps and Teams, do you recommend to turn that off?
Do we recommend to turn it off? Well, that's a good question. I mean, if you don't need any of those third-party apps, then it's probably a good idea to turn it off. Microsoft are adding to that list all the time, though, so it's possible that you might find it quite handy. There might be a particular, like you may be using Evernote or something like that. So I would say turn it off if you actually don't want it, but be aware that one of the beauties of Teams is the flexibility as well. So if you allow your employees, the people you work with, to have some flexibility, they might have some creative solutions that might come out of it. So yeah, it's all up in the air on that at the moment. But yeah, take a view of it.
Next question is, what's the best way to disable some of the connectors? Okay,
so that's an admin job. Yeah, so the admin, there are a number of things that are on by default. And Microsoft have tried to make it easy for people to get in there, but of course you may not want certain things. So in the admin interface, so there are a number of, Office 365 has a number of administrative consoles. One of them is Teams and Skype. So the admin will be able to go in there and decide what they don't want.
Next question. In Teams, activities and chats are displayed by default, oldest on top, newest at the bottom, meaning you have to scroll. Can this order be changed?
I don't think that can at the moment. These are lots of little things that if you feed that into user voice at Microsoft, the Teams guys are always saying, tell us what you want to do, tell us how you want things to work. So yeah, little things like that, once people are starting to use them, they're asking, oh, can I change this, can I change that? So that would be a good comment to put in user voice.
Next question. Can you restrict apps? For example, approve some apps?
Sure. Yeah. Again, the administrator can do that. So they can decide what they want to actually be allowed or not.
And we have a Yammer question. We have SharePoint. Do you think there's any reason to have Yammer? We don't use Yammer at the moment. Any benefit of Yammer over SharePoint sites?
Right. So it's very interesting. There's a lot of overlap in a number of these products. So there's another thing which I haven't even dared to mention, but I might do now. Office 365 groups. And there's quite a lot of overlapping of different areas here. If you're using SharePoint, it's doing everything that you require, then there's no point starting to use Yammer. Yammer primarily is a chat-based application. So in that you can have a file store, you can share files, etc. But if you're working happily with SharePoint, I wouldn't worry too much about trying to implement Yammer unless you need it. That is to set up some kind of information service throughout your organization. But what I would say is definitely Teams is going to come along, because it's going to take, if you're using Skype for Business, Teams is going to be the place where you make your calls. If I just go back to the Teams thing here. So we just focused on Teams here, but we've got chat, we can pick a person, and obviously you can do your voice call or your video call, screen sharing, etc. All of that happens here. Meetings, hooks into the Outlook calendar. You can schedule meetings from here and set that up. Or you can, if we go back to the chat, where are we now then? Or just click on this guy here. You can do a direct message. So if you don't want the chat to be in the channel, you can do that. So all the kind of things you might have been familiar with in Skype for Business, doing direct messaging, voice, audio, video, etc., and more, are definitely going to be in Teams. And you can, you can add, I think it's 2,500 people to a team. So smaller organizations could possibly use a team even for what they might have used Yammer for. But I don't hear from Microsoft anytime soon that they're actually thinking of killing off Yammer in place of Teams. If you think about Yammer as enterprise chat and Teams, the name kind of gives it away, doesn't it?
Next question, Martin. Can anyone create a SharePoint site?
Okay, good. Back to the home page then, if we come back in here and get to the SharePoint. So the key behind that really is permissions, as always with all of these things. And so you've got this little create site up here. And so one of the options that the admins have in the admin panel is to allow people to create sites or not. So if they've left that in the default setting, everybody's going to see create site. But if they've flipped the switch, then you won't see create site.
Okay.
It's an organization decision.
Okay. Time for maybe one or two more questions. Can I use Flow with SharePoint on-premise?
Okay. So Flow is clearly in the cloud. And if you've got on-premise, then that's not in the cloud, is it? So yes, you can. But you would have to, your developers, admin guys would have to build a custom connector for that, and then the Flow could connect into your on-premise SharePoint. So yes, but it requires a little bit better work.
And okay, for our last question, Is Microsoft changing the name of Office 365 to Microsoft 365?
Okay. Let's just go back to the slide and back to the roadmap slide there. Yep. So you might have noticed Microsoft 365. Microsoft does some fun things with its branding at times, doesn't it? And Office 365 has taken off fantastically well. Obviously, the 365 thing gives people the idea of cloud and availability. So no, it isn't a change of name here. What they've done, they've tried to capitalize on the success of Office 365 and get people to subscribe to the desktop operating system as well. So rather than people having to pay for it and then not changing the desktop operating system for several years, therefore Microsoft don't get any money for several years, you can, on a subscription basis, subscribe to the desktop and some security and enterprise security features as well. But largely that's it. So Office 365 is part of Microsoft 365, but it's not a replacement for it. It's Microsoft 365 is Office 365 plus a few other bits and bobs as well. Hopefully that clears that up. And they've made their two roadmaps into one, so you just go to the Microsoft 365 roadmap and just click on Office 365 and you just see those bits.
Okay, it looks like we are at time. Thank you, Martin, and thanks to everyone who joined us today for this webinar. We hope that you found the Office 365 content valuable. And as Martin indicated, please visit learningtree.com under our resources section for upcoming webinars, as well as this webinar and others that are available on demand. So thank you again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Take care.